and in this video we are going to talk about advantage and disadvantage structure. We'll begin by understanding why it's important to understand how advantages and disadvantages are structured. The first is that the language, the terms that we use to describe the structure of advantages and disadvantages are used through a multiplicity of different arguments, whether it be critiques, topicality, disads to different counterplans, add-ons, whatever you want to call it. Links and impacts and uniqueness are terms that are going to be used throughout debate in multiple different ways. So it's important to understand what those terms mean in general in order to be able to understand what they mean in other contexts. The second reason why it's important to understand disadvantage and advantage structure is it's key to understanding what should be debated. Link arguments usually determine what type of things we should be learning about in debate topics, and also help determine what is a competitively equitable division of ground inside of debate. And then the third and probably the best reason why it's important to understand what disadvantages and advantages are is that it's a very common argument, both by the affirmative and their advantages to whatever proposal they are forwarding, or to a negative and the disadvantages that they run. There are 3.5 parts to an advantage or disadvantage. The first is uniqueness. The second is a link. The half is an internal link. And the reason it's a half is because it's not always present inside of a different piece of evidence. Sometimes link evidence is really good and there are internal links inside of it. And then impact. The first part of an advantage or a disadvantage is a uniqueness claim. And a uniqueness claim describes what is going on in the status quo. For this sort of conversation, we're going to look at a cliff over here and our friend Frederick right there, who is standing near a cliff. So uniqueness is going to describe what he is doing right then and there. For advantages, you will see Frederick moving in this direction. He's going to be moving towards the cliff. For disadvantages, our friend Frederick is either going to be standing still or moving away from the cliff. The uniqueness pieces of evidence will often be claims of fact, and they will be descriptive in nature, just saying the status quo is operating like X. The second part of a disadvantage or advantage is a link. And a link is based upon how does the AF change the status quo. For disadvantages, remember that Frederick was moving, he was either standing still or he was moving this way. The link argument inside of a disadvantage would move Frederick towards the cliff. So let me repeat that. Frederick was moving away from the cliff, but the AF made him turn around and start moving towards the cliff. Advantages, if you recall, Frederick was moving towards the cliff already, and the link would move Frederick around and make Frederick move away from the cliff. So an internal link. What does an internal link do? Well, an internal link is how do you get from the link of moving Frederick to the terminal impact. Now, I'm going to suppose that you understand that falling off the cliff is probably a bad thing. So, an internal link usually operates somewhere in here and explains why Frederick moving in this direction actually causes him to fall off the cliff. Here's an example that we have over here. If the uniqueness is that the U.S. economy, U.S. economic collapse coming in the status quo, i.e. Frederick is moving towards the cliff right now, the plan saves the economy. The internal link explains why the U.S. economy would cause Frederick to fall off and cause an economic collapse on the global scale and cause World War III. The impact. The impact, or fiery pit of doom, is what is the bad thing that happens from the plan action happening. So Frederick moves over here and he falls off the cliff. What happens? This will always be a bad thing of some sort, and both teams will claim by voting for them you are able to prevent our friend Frederick from falling off the cliff. Hopefully now you understand the basic structure of an advantage or a disadvantage.